You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, nutrition, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere, anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your hosts, Dr. Justin Marchigiani and Barris Harvey, as they answer your burning health questions, as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Hi, this is Dr. Justin Marchigiani, and we're back with Beyond Wellness Radio. Again, Barris Harvey will not be here today, but I'll be joined by Jimmy Moore. And again, Jimmy Moore, I don't think really needs an introduction. He's got the biggest low-carbohydrate blog on the internet. He also has a couple new books out. Our one book last year was Cholesterol Clarity, and he teamed up again with Eric Westman, Dr. Eric Westman, to write Keto Clarity. Jimmy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Justin, what's going on, man?
Not too much. I'm really excited to get some more information about ketones and ketosis. There are a lot of myths out there. And yeah. I have a lot of my patients that are, they're using keto sticks or ketosis as a way of losing weight. There's also many other health benefits that come from being in ketosis. It almost sounds like it's too good to be true. I want to put the ball in your court. There's so many benefits out there. Why don't you tell us about a couple of them and why they seem so good to be true?
It's funny because people, they look for a miracle pill. They're looking for all the right health that comes in a pill. Let me just give you a stark shake back into reality, people. There is no such thing as health in a pill. Health comes from nutrition. And the right nutrition. And unfortunately, we've been given the wrong nutrition for far too long. And people think healthy means, oh, well, that's low fat. That's low calorie. That's, exercising on a treadmill for hours a day, on and on and on. And yet what we're trying to communicate with Keto Clarity is, hey, there's a new way to look at things from kind of a low carb, high fat perspective. And the high fat's kind of a new concept for a lot of people. Justin, they'll be like, well, wait a minute, I understand low carb, but what's with this high fat thing? So when you cut carbs and you're trying to be ketogenic, which in a nutshell, basically ketogenic means you're trying to be a fat burner, not a sugar burner. 99% of the world's population right now is burning sugar for fuel. But if you want to optimize your health and get these benefits from the ketones that we're about to tell you, you've really got to shift your carbs down to your personal tolerance level, moderate your protein intake, and we can talk about that in a second, and then eat more fat probably than you've ever thought about eating in your life. And when I refer to fat, I'm talking about saturated and monounsaturated fats primarily. Of course, the omega-3 fats throw in there as well. But we're not talking about vegetable oils. Don't drink the vegetable oils. I know that's what they tell you is the healthy oils, but they are not healthy. They cause inflammation, which we talked about in Cholesterol Clarity. But you asked about the health benefits that come from being in ketosis. And one of the biggest ones, and this is a big sign that your diet is the right one, is you have natural appetite control. You don't have hunger pangs 2 hours after having that oatmeal with margarine on top, with berries and a glass of orange juice for breakfast. Why are you hungry 2 hours later if that's a satiating, well, nutrient-dense meal for you? Why are you hungry? Hunger is one of the first signs you're missing something in your diet, either macro or micronutrient-wise. So that's a big one, Justin. The mental clarity that I get from having ketones, I mean, I can tell when I'm out of ketosis because I'll start getting that kind of brain fog where it's just kind of, you see those cartoons with the little lightning bolt and the cloud over their head. People, they walk around, that's how they feel. And yet it's almost like, the skies open up and the sun shines out, and ketones provide that. Why does that happen? Well, your brain, 25% of the fat in your body is in that brain. They call us a fat head for a reason. We are fat heads, and if you're not feeding it fat, which in turn turns to ketones, then you're not feeding it what it wants, and it will just scream at you, please feed me more fat. I often wonder sometimes these low-fat vegans that are out there that are very militant and have anger issues, and they're always, really mad at everything. I wonder, is it a lack of fat in their diet? And that's not a criticism of them. I'm honestly wondering, is their behavior because they're not consuming enough fats?
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So, I could go on and on. Stabilized blood sugar happens. Your insulin sensitivity is restored when you're in ketosis. Inflammation levels are down. All of these things contribute to optimized health, and that is what we're hopefully all striving for.
That's great. I think there was a movie in the 80s or the 90s with Meryl Streep called Do No Harm, and weren't they talking about a ketogenic diet in that movie and helping to cure epilepsy?
Yeah, we actually provide a link to it in the book itself in Keto Clarity. It's called First Do No Harm, and you can actually watch it for free on YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com, type in First Do No Harm Meryl Streep, you will be able to find that, and it's the whole movie. My wife Christine and I actually watched that a few months back. But yeah, it was all about probably what the ketogenic diet is most famous for. No, it's not Dr. Atkins' weight loss diet. It's actually most famous for being one of the longest running, well-studied ways to control epileptic seizures. And I'll tell you what, Justin, I thought I ate pretty hardcore ketogenic. This diet is pretty darn hardcore. I was looking at it in preparation for this book, and it's a 4-to-1 ratio of fat to the combined carbohydrate and protein. So the fat intake, for example, could be like 80% of the diet, and then the other 20% is the combined of protein and carbohydrate. So,
wow.
These kids that have epilepsy, they're showing dramatic improvements eating this way. It's not a cure-all for everybody that has epilepsy, that has seizures, but it sure does work in a whole lot of people. That definitely makes it worth giving it a go if you have a child, especially with epilepsy. And I mean, you sit there in that movie, it was funny when they started feeding the kid who was a wonderful actor, by the way. He did not have epilepsy, but you would believe that he did with all the seizures, the way he dramatically interpreted those. It was awesome. But he had bacon and eggs, for breakfast with lots of fat on top. And it was like, hey, that's like my breakfast.
Oh, wow. Now, imagine with these diets, from what I understand, back in the 20s, the Mayo Clinic was using ketogenic diets for epilepsy, and they were having, I think, an 80% cure rate, which is unreal. Yeah. And it's just like cream and eggs and full fat meats like ribeye. What would the typical diet be like for these kids with epilepsy?
Well, and let me be very clear. They actually have made the ketogenic diet, all capital letters. The is capitalized T, K capitalized ketogenic, and diet capitalized D. They differentiate that from like an Atkins describing itself as ketogenic, because they want people to know this is therapeutic for seizure control. And even now there's researchers out there, Dr. Eric Kossoff, most famous at Johns Hopkins University, who's using this, and they're calling it a modified Atkins diet. It's basically a much more ketogenic inducing diet, which we're going to talk about here in a second, why Atkins may not be ketogenic inducing. But what you want to do is produce those ketones. And so they measure off exact measurements of fat and exact measurements of carbohydrate and exact measurements of protein, because they don't want these kids to not get those therapeutic benefits. And, that's one thing we tried to do in Keto Clarity is say, okay, if you want to know what that right formula is for you, here's how you figure it out. There's no macronutrient ratio that's magical, that's going to work for everybody. I could sit here and say, oh yeah, eat 80% of your diet as fat, 15% of your diet as protein, and 5% of your diet as a carbohydrate, and you'll magically be in ketosis.
Right.
Well, not everybody needs to do necessarily that ratio, and that doesn't even bring into the equation calories. And it also neglects that some people are a little more sensitive to carbohydrates and protein than others. So there's no magic pill. You kind of have to figure it out. No magic formula. You have to figure it out for yourself, what's right for you to get into ketosis, and we help you do that in Keto Clarity.
That's great. And what would you say that the top five biggest foods, whole food sources are for inducing ketosis? And I understand that's a loaded question because if you're eating a whole bunch of carbohydrate with it,
right,
it doesn't matter what you eat, but just based on your experience.
Well, let's assume you've dialed in your carbs to your tolerance level, which for me personally, Justin, is about 30 grams.
Okay, 30.
And then dial in your protein. And if you're real sensitive to carbs, guess what? Newsflash, you're also going to be sensitive to protein because there's this long G word we talk about in the book called gluconeogenesis. Basically, that's where you have excess protein and it gets converted into sugar by the liver. And so people don't realize that. They've always heard, oh, well, a ketogenic diet, high protein, low carb. No, it's not. It's high fat, moderate in protein, and low in carbs. So let's skip right to the fats then, because if you've got your carbs dialed in, 30 grams there for me, and your protein moderated down, and for me, protein is around 80 to 100 grams a day, which translates to about 6 ounces of like a steak or something like that, 4 eggs and 3 ounces of meat or something like that. And then the rest is fat. So that's going to be the magical part of getting into ketosis. So what are those fats that you can consume? Dude, I so love grass-fed butter. I mean, yes. I'm like infamous at these paleo conferences and on the low-carb cruise. I bring my own Kerrygold butter, and I'm literally eating a little bit of butter in every bite of food that I have. And people kind of look at you weird when you do that. But for me, that's the way I know I have to eat to get all those benefits we just talked about. And we list a whole slew of benefits on page 37 when people get the book. But, so grass-fed butter, number one. You said 5, right?
Yes, top 5.
So coconut oil is another fabulous fat. It's 90% saturated fat. And people freak out about saturated fat, and we do a whole chapter on fat and why you got to get over your fat phobia. If people are worried about raising their HDL or LDL cholesterol and total cholesterol and getting heart disease and clogging their arteries and all that, please go read my last book, Cholesterol Clarity, because we put that one hopefully to rest. So now that we're talking about high-fat diets, you shouldn't be freaked out about that. So coconut oil, number 2.
Got it.
Full-fat meats. People forget chicken breast is not a health food, people. I'm sorry. It's just not. Especially if it's from the tea company.
Yeah.
The Tyson company does not care about your health. All they care about is their bottom line profits. And it sickens me that the number one meat sold in America is chicken breast. Let's stop buying those stupid things because they're only giving you way too much protein, kicking in that gluconeogenesis we were just talking about. It's not healthy. So you want to try to pick the fattier cuts of meat. In fact, go to your butcher or go to your local farm if you're going to, go get some meat, get a good grass-fed meat, but ask for the extra fat that comes with it because they usually trim it off.
Yeah. Thinking
people don't want that. They might even sell that to you at a dirt cheap price.
Oh, yeah.
You want that fat.
Absolutely.
And on that note, number 4, pork lard is really incredible as well. If you're not cooking with butter or coconut oil, try lard. And again, it's that whole imagery of, we've heard lard butt, kind of as a slur.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. Lard doesn't give you a butt. It really does not. If you're keeping your carbs limited and you're trying to be ketotic, lard is probably one of the healthiest things that you could consume. Then if I had to do one more food to induce ketosis, the thing that helps me a lot, and it's only because I can tolerate it, is full-fat dairy. So things like cream and full-fat cheeses. Please stay away from American cheese that is not cheese. I don't care how low in carbs it is. It's not cheese. Neither is Velveeta. Please stay away from that plastic crap.
Yeah, absolutely.
And get real whole food cheese, real raw sources of dairy if you can. I know here in South Carolina where I live, you can get raw dairy and it's legal here in this state. I think it's 10 states that it's legal in still. find the best quality sources of, full fat Greek yogurt is really amazing. So anything that's going to have I turn to the nutritional label on the back, Justin, and I look first at the fat. I want to see, is it like big time double digit fat? Okay, good. Then I immediately go down to the protein. And if the protein is like half the number of the fat, okay, that's not too bad. I'd prefer it to be like a fourth of the fat. And that's optimal. And then, of course, carbohydrates in whatever that product is need to be pretty darn low as well. So that's my 5, and I'm sticking to them.
I love it. I got a couple follow-ups right off of that. So what are your takes? You mentioned, I think you mentioned grass-fed meat, correct?
I did.
Do you have any favorite steaks like Delmonico, ribeyes, New York? Do you have any steak faves in there?
Yeah, the kind that doesn't go moo anymore. I don't really care. Really any of them that have a nice marble. I'm a sucker for a really good filet mignon when it's done well.
Yeah.
And then on top, instead of steak sauce, people like, oh, what do you eat with your steak if you don't have sugar? Because A1 has sugar in it. Well, guess what? The best steak sauce I've found is garlic butter. I tell you what, man, you put garlic butter on top of a steak, and then maybe a little sour cream too. Oh
my gosh.
So luscious. It's so good.
I was at a steakhouse here in Austin just the other day, and I was having a steak, ribeye, and I asked the lady for a side of butter, and I was putting the butter on the steak and eating it with it, and I just had a little small thing of broccoli, and everyone's looking at me like I have 10 heads. I'm like, no, this is good. This is good.
I tell a story when I go out to eat. I tell a story in Keto Clarity. When I go out to eat, I look at the server and I say, do you have real butter? So once I ascertain that they have real butter, which you have to know what that means, and I say, okay, bring me more butter than you've ever brought any human being in your life. And, they think I'm joking, but my wife, Christine, says he's not kidding. So I've gotten as little as 2 pats at a restaurant to actually your hometown of Austin, Texas, holds the record. The 24 diner, I went to Paleo FX a couple of years ago, and the 24 diner, that poor server brought me 16 pats of butter.
Oh, my gosh.
I ate every single one of them with my breakfast that I had that day. I could see them over there in the corner. They were like all huddled up looking at He just ate number 8. He just ate the 8th one. And it was like a sport watching me eat butter. But yeah, it looks weird, but I know that's what I need to do to get all those benefits that come from nutritional ketosis. Now, does everybody need to eat that much butter? Probably not.
Right.
I just know for me, if I eat that way, and that was the only meal I had all day that day, I was able to go through the whole conference at Paleo FX and not be hungry and fully engaged, fully energetic, all this stuff. Didn't feel like that oatmeal and orange juice story I gave earlier that I had to eat 2 hours later. That's what I know it takes to keep me satiated, and it's the ketones that do that.
And again, I imagine you put out there one caveat would be you don't want to have a lot of sugar if you're going to be eating all that fat. We want to make sure it's fat without all the extra carbs.
Yeah, dial in your carb tolerance level, and it's definitely not going to include sugar.
That's great points there. I know Gary Taubes has mentioned this. I think a couple other low-carb docs have mentioned this too, that dairy with some people can be insulin producing. What are your thoughts on that as some people being dairy sensitive and creating more of an insulinogenic response?
Yeah, I believe it can happen. My own wife, Christine, actually has had to give up a lot of the dairy she used to eat because I get away with a lot of dairy.
Yeah.
I can consume it, and it doesn't seem to be problematic for me in terms of fasting insulin levels. But for her fasting insulin levels started getting up there a little bit, and we couldn't figure it out because she was in ketosis and she was, eating low carb and doing all the things that she needs to do, and yet she still was seeing these fasting insulin levels go up. So we've switched over from putting like heavy cream in her latte in the morning to now using coconut milk in her latte. So you make little changes here and there, and you just got to kind of figure that out for yourself. Again, it's part of that testing process. Try no dairy and see how you feel, and then maybe introduce it back in. Some of these elimination diets are really good. The Whole30 from Dallas and Melissa Hartwig.
Yeah.
It's really fabulous. It starts with food. Their overwhelming New York Times bestselling book check that out because it really does help you identify what it is you are sensitive to. So figure that out. Maybe dairy's good for you, but maybe it's not. So, that's kind of the difference between paleo and primal. Paleo is no dairy. Primal is kind of, the high fat dairy. I label what I do kind of a primaleo ketogenic.
I love it. That's great. So what's your take on bulletproof coffee? Have you tried adding butter and MCT oil to your coffee as a way of inducing more ketones in the bloodstream?
I have interviewed the man himself, doctor. He would kill me if I called him doctor. But Dave Asprey from the Bulletproof Executive, who came up with that. And I remember when I interviewed him for the first time, I told him, I said, dude, I hate coffee. It's the most disgusting thing in the world to me. And he's like, oh, but you'll love my coffee. So he sends me some of his coffee, and I go buy this fancy coffee machine. I do the blender and all the stuff with the MCT oil and all that. And I drink it and I spit it out because it's the most disgusting thing. So I'm the wrong person to ask about bulletproof coffee because I hate coffee
in general.
That said, anybody that wants to get more fat into their diet that does like coffee, definitely I can see bulletproof coffee being a great way to do that. Now, I know there's been some criticisms about bulletproof coffee. It's excessive calories, and what about the fat? And that's going to cause dyslipidemia and all this kind of stuff that's put out there. To me, if your goal is ketosis, basically bulletproof coffee is all fat. There's no protein and no carbs in it at all. It's all fat. What's the harm in kind of getting ketosis jump-started in the morning with a cup of Joe that has a lot of fat in it? I see no downside if you like coffee. Again, that caveat.
Yeah.
I don't. I would just much rather just eat the butter straight up.
I love it.
The stick of butter, just take it and just gnaw on it.
I love it. Yeah, I personally see coffee and vegetables as basically put on this earth to be
conduits for the butter.
To be conduits of the butter, to get it down. I just love it. It just gets it in there.
That's right.
Very cool. And what I'm really waiting for a blood sugar meter that tests ketones and insulin together.
You're living in my dream world because that is what I'm looking for. I think what's going to happen, Justin, we'll see it in a medical device attached to a smartphone eventually. I think someday that's where it's going to move. I don't think there'll be a device per se that would do all that. But trust me, I, as a quantified selfer N=1er, I would love to have a fasting insulin test at home, a ketone, blood sugar, all in one with the same blood drop. That would be awesome.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Because I see so many people with okay blood sugar, but again, we look at their insulin levels on a glucose tolerance. Their insulin's so high to get their blood sugar down there to that safe level. So if you didn't have the insulin there, they would fall under the radar. So many people, I feel like, without the insulin, they can escape underneath the radar.
Yeah, indeed. And thank you for bringing that up because I think people think, well, my blood sugar's normal according to what my doctor said. Anything under 100 is normal, but 99 blood sugar, but your fasting insulin is, say, 14.
Yeah.
That's not real good. You need to kind of figure out why is the fasting insulin so high, and you wouldn't know that unless you tested.
I love it. And how important is having the right insulin level to being in ketosis? How important is that?
I often put out there that blood sugar that's elevated is the quickest way to kill your ketones. And the same goes for insulin. Insulin levels that are up means ketone levels will be down. You really have to control the blood sugar and the insulin, which incidentally, Justin, it just so happens that when you put your body into a ketogenic state, guess what happens to blood sugar and guess what happens to insulin levels?
They all normalize. Yeah,
they go down. They normalize. That's right. And even better than normalize, because when your ketone levels go up, something interesting happens to your blood sugar levels. I'm not sure what happens to the insulin, but blood sugar levels will be correlated going down the higher your blood ketone levels go up. So one time I had the highest reading I ever got on the blood ketone meter, 6.7 millimolar, which is really high. But at the same time, my blood sugar level was 62, and I was completely cognizant. There was no signs of like hypoglycemia, but people would see a 62 blood sugar. I've even been in the 50s before, completely aware. But because the ketones were higher, they were stepping into the place of where the blood sugar would be in the bloodstream, and totally normal. So we kind of have to shift our paradigm of what we see as normal. Most doctors say, well, anything kind of under 100 is a good blood sugar.
Right.
Well, if you're in nutritional ketosis and you got a 99 or 100 blood sugar, guess what? You probably aren't in nutritional ketosis, because that's almost impossible to have simultaneously high blood sugar levels and higher blood ketone levels.
Good point. Now, can you talk about the process of getting into ketosis? I know this is known as keto adaptation. And
right.
I've heard it takes about 1 to 2 weeks. I've seen it in myself and my patients. Talk about that. And I find this 2-week time frame, 1 to 2 week time frame, depending on the individual, can really make it so someone doesn't get into that ketosis state because they just can't take the cravings and such. Can you talk more about that and tricks to get in there better and faster?
Sure. Wow, that's a lot of questions you threw at me there. So basically the 1 to 2 weeks, I would say if you already generally eat a low carb diet, within 1 to 2 weeks, you probably should be there. If you're coming from the SAD diet where you're eating a lot of carbs, it may take upwards of 4 to 6 weeks. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but it does take time for the body to make that shift from being a sugar burner to a carb burner. I think about 410-pound Jimmy Moore back in 2004, who just came off of drinking 16 cans of Coca-Cola a day, 2 boxes of Little Debbie snack cakes a day, big plates of pasta. I mean, I was a carboholic, Justin.
Wow.
Probably 1,500 grams of carbohydrates a day I was consuming.
Wow.
And that Jimmy Moore would not have gotten keto adapted in 1 to 2 weeks. He probably would have been at least 1 to 2 months before he got there. But we can all get there.
Right.
And you asked how. So there's kind of a 3-legged stool as to how you can get there. And in the book, we actually created this acronym that hopefully will be something people can like print out and put up on their refrigerator. But the acronym is KETO. K stands for keep carbs low. And low is going to be relative. You got to figure out what your carb tolerance level is first. And once you get the carb tolerance level, and we show you how to do that with a blood sugar monitor, triglycerides is kind of a good telltale sign. If you've got trigs on your cholesterol panel that are over 100, guess what that means? You're probably eating a few too many carbs for your carb tolerance level. So back off on the carbs, and that trigs number will go back below 100, which you're better off metabolically that way anyway.
Right.
The E in keto stands for eat more fat. We kind of talked about this already, the saturated and monounsaturated fats. Avocados are great monounsaturated fat. And, of course, saturated fat, we've already talked about all those foods earlier. T is for test ketones often. And this is one we can kind of expand upon here in a minute if you want to. But basically, there's 3 different ways you can test now. Traditionally, it's been the urine test. The gold standard right now is kind of the blood ketone test. That's that 6.7 I was just telling you about. And then there's emerging technology that's coming with breath ketone meters, and we can talk about that in a second. But the last letter in keto in the acronym O, overdoing protein is bad. So you want to moderate down that protein to your personal threshold level. And again, you kind of have to test to see, and we show you how to do that in the book. So the 3-legged stool is control your carbs to your tolerance, moderate your protein to your threshold level, your personal threshold level, eat fat to satiety, mostly saturated and monounsaturated fats. You do those 3 things and then test for those ketones, and you're going to be gold.
Great points. I know a lot of people that are kind of against the low carb ketogenic type of eating. One of the biggest things they talk about is constipation. I know there's been some new research out there regarding resistant starch in the blogosphere, talking about these low-carb eating plans. We decrease certain bacteria in our gut, especially the Erectile and the Roseburia bacteria. And again, these bacteria, they produce butyrate, which is the same fat that we were eating anyway, which is quite interesting. So can you talk about resistant starch, and is it possible to include resistant starch in your eating plan and still be low-carb and ketogenic?
Let me address the constipation thing first, because when you said that, I thought about my interview I had, a very famous interview with the vegan doctor, Dr. John McDougall.
Yes.
And I remember at one point in the conversation, he was very belligerent, by the way. If you want to go have some fun, go Google John McDougall, Jimmy Moore, and you'll find our interview. But so he said, how's the constipation? And I said, I'm not having constipation. Oh, well, Dr. Atkins himself said that you'd have constipation. I'm like, I drink plenty of water and eat enough vegetables that I don't have an issue with constipation. So it's kind of funny that that's kind of put out there as a meme of, well, don't eat low carb or you're going to get constipated. I have never had that problem if you just drink enough. So you asked about resistant starch. We do address this in the book, surprisingly, because it's kind of it's an unknown right now. Nobody's really done any controlled randomized clinical trials of this yet. So, we just don't know. I think it's another one of those things of test and see if you feel like you want to try it and see. I know my wife, Christine, actually wants to test resistant starch. She stays pretty ketogenic all the time, but she's interested in maybe trying to optimize the microbiota in her gut and see what this would do. So I'm very curious about it, and I'm urging other people. I actually had on the Live and La Vida Low Carb show, my podcast, I had Richard Nicolai and some other people, my friend Tom Naughton from the Fathead movie, that they are communicating, hey, this is working for some people and it's helping to restore that gut health. Give it a go. If you're having issues in your health that maybe the ketogenic diet isn't helping by itself, maybe this is something else. And the interesting thing about resistant starch is ketosis and resistant starch aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. You can be both, and not necessarily everybody, but I think a good chunk of people could indeed become ketogenic using resistant starch, because the resistant starch actually turns into the fat that would turn into ketones in the body. So I'm not anti-resistant starch. I personally have not done it. Simply because I'm doing okay with what I'm doing now, staying in ketosis all the time nutritionally without it.
Fix it, right?
Exactly.
Love it. That's good. And myself, I do well on a ketogenic diet, but I do some CrossFit, I do some high intensity movement. So I find doing a cyclical ketogenic diet where I I'm in it for a couple of days and then come out. What's your take on cyclical ketogenic diets?
Yeah, again, that's, I think, one of those things you'll just have to kind of figure out what works for you. And Justin, you certainly figured that out, that's a good approach for you. I don't personally cycle carbs. And I know John Kiefer, one of my experts in the book, he's a big fan of kind of doing this backloading of carbohydrates, after a workout and the carb night solution. So, it's one of those things, and I sound like a broken record, but it's a key theme throughout Keto Clarity is you got to figure out what works for you. And I can't tell you what your macronutrient ratio is. I can't tell you if resistant starch is good for you. I can't tell you if cycling the carbs every couple of days like Justin does is going to work for you. You just got to kind of tinker around and, there's no shame in trying something and it doesn't work. You just go back to what does work.
Right. Exactly. So there's a couple of myths out there I hear all the time with dietitians. When the word ketosis gets brought up, it's like a switch goes off in that person's head and they just think ketoacidosis. Can we talk about the difference, Jimmy?
They go bat crap crazy, don't they?
Oh my gosh. It's just insane.
This is my favorite question, so thank you for asking this one. And it was so important, Justin, that we not only addressed it one time in the book, I think we addressed it about 6 or 7 times at least in the book. We just want to remind you, in case you missed it the first 6 times, we're going to tell you again.
Love it.
So, the difference between nutritional ketosis, which is kind of what we're talking about in Keto Clarity, and diabetic ketoacidosis could not be more night and day. And unfortunately, the problem that comes into play, it's kind of like the problem with fat. Fat makes you fat. Fat clogs your artery. There's kind of this negative connotation with fat, even though fat's not the enemy. The same goes with ketosis and ketoacidosis. They sound similar, but here's the deal. Diabetic ketoacidosis can only happen in people with type 1 diabetes or those type 2 diabetics that are truly insulin dependent. They've lost all beta cell function, can't make insulin at all. If you live on this planet and you can at least make a little bit of insulin, it is impossible for you to have diabetic ketoacidosis. I can't emphasize that enough. People that have some insulin ability, there's no way you could get diabetic ketoacidosis. But it doesn't happen as a result of consuming a low-carb, high-fat diet. Diabetic ketoacidosis happens from eating too many carbs and not putting insulin in your body to handle those carbs.
Right.
So your blood sugar in that type 1 diabetic and the insulin-dependent type 2 diabetics, your blood sugar goes up and up and up in excess of 240, and the body in that person then starts kind of freaking out, and it's like, oh, well, we need energy. We don't have any energy, even though there's plenty of energy with the blood sugar.
Right.
We need energy, so it starts creating ketone bodies at the same time that blood sugar is going up. So diabetic ketoacidosis is, the hallmark of it is very high blood sugar in excess of 240, very extremely high levels of blood ketones. Now, I told you the highest I've ever gotten is 6.7, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did that one time. It's usually way down like 2 or 3 at the very highest now. What we're talking about with diabetic ketoacidosis is closer to 20 millimolar. So even at my highest, I was still about a third, less than a third of what would be considered diabetic ketoacidosis levels of ketones. But remember, my blood sugar at that time was 62. Diabetic ketoacidosis is well in excess of 240. So nutritionally, if you're eating a low-carb, moderated protein, high-fat diet, you should never, ever, 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 did I say ever, ever get diabetic ketoacidosis, because the hallmark of nutritional ketosis is moderately high levels of ketones, but a simultaneously lowering of that blood sugar like we talked about a while ago.
And I like how you're putting that meme out there, nutritional ketosis, because that needs to be there, because we can go into ketosis through starvation, right?
Right.
So it talks about really having a good diet behind it that's ideally nutrient dense as well, that's allowing that ketosis to facilitate itself, correct?
That is right.
Great. And then regarding the ketones, you mentioned the 6.0, the molar type of standard deviation there. If we're talking about a keto sticks that I think are milligrams per deciliters, what number would you see on there to indicate ketoacidosis?
I'm not sure, because that's kind of what their purpose is or was when they first came out. I would think it would be anything that would be on that darker purple end. I don't have the number, but I think it'd be like well in excess of that 160 that's on the urine ketone sticks. You kind of threw me for a loop there when you threw the ketoacidosis in there.
Got it.
And we haven't talked about the different tests. Would you like to cover the various ways of testing for nutritional ketosis?
Would love to. That's a great segue.
Yeah. So there are 3 different types of ketone bodies in the body. And the one that everybody knows about is the one that you just talked about, and that's acetoacetate. That's the ketone body that's in the urine. And so you usually pee on the stick that you were just talking about, and you get anywhere from it starts at beige with no ketones, from pink to purple, and even darker than that. And people get all excited when it turns really dark. Ooh, I'm in deep ketosis.
Right.
And if you're just starting off, those are probably okay. You can buy a bottle of 15 of those or 50 of those for like $15 at your drugstore. So really kind of a good way early on to kind of reassure yourself that, okay, I'm on the right track. I'm at least spilling ketones into my urine.
Right.
But the problem that comes into play, Justin, is once you become keto adapted. So after that 1 to 2 week period for the people that already probably eat pretty low carb, or that 4 to 6 week period, or maybe 4 to 6 months for that Jimmy Moore who was eating 1,500 grams of carbs, period of adaptation, you might lose your urine ketones. Now, does that mean you've done something wrong? No, it means you've done something very right. But unfortunately, people that are peeing on the urine sticks are saying, what the heck? I'm eating low carb. I'm feeling great. I feel like I'm in ketosis, but I'm not showing any on the acetoacetate measuring sticks anymore. What's going on? Well, here's what's going on. The acetoacetate becomes converted into beta hydroxybutyrate, which is the active ketone in the blood. So that's why measuring for blood ketones is probably going to be the best way to know where you stand in nutritional ketosis. So the blood ketone meters, there's two of them out there. There's one called Novamax Plus. It's okay, but there's some discrepancies when you're in the lower levels of ketosis. It just gives you a low. It doesn't really give you an actual number. So that doesn't help people. The one that I promote to people is called Precision Extra, and it's about $15 or $20 for the device itself. Where they get you, Justin, is the strips.
Got it.
In America, those strips can cost upwards of $3 to $5 a piece. Now, I was testing day and night for a year, and sometimes every hour on the hour some of those days. That's expensive if you're getting them from America. So Canadian pharmacies have them for about $2 a piece. I've got a friend that lives in Australia, and he's like, hey, Mike, you can get those for 70 cents here. And I'm going, can you hook me up, dude?
That's great. So Precision Extra and Novamax, those are the big ones.
Those are the two, and I would not recommend the Novamax at all because of the discrepancies in the lower levels of ketosis. You don't want to be discouraged when you start this. You want to have every, reinforcement of what you're doing. And if a meter is sitting there telling you low when you could be at, say, a 0.8 or a 0.9, which would be in ketosis, and it's saying low, that could discourage you. And so one thing we haven't said, the range on the blood ketone monitor, 0.5 is kind of the very, very low end of nutritional ketosis. So that's kind of where it starts. And then the benefits, according to Jeff Volek and Steve Finney, two great researchers in this realm, go all the way to 3.0 millimolar. And once you hit 3.0 on the blood ketone meter, there's really no added benefit to being higher than that. So blood ketones are a great way to measure. Now, again, the cost issue with testing is the big problem. So that's why I'm really excited, and we share about this in the book, of the emerging technology with the third ketone body. This is the last one that's in the body. It's called acetone, and that's in the breath. And some people are like, well, if acetoacetate disappears in the urine, doesn't acetone disappear in the breath once you become keto adapted? The answer is no. There's been two really good studies that have correlated beta hydroxybutyrate levels in the blood with acetone levels in the breath. They correlate pretty well, and I actually have a breath ketone meter. There's one right now that's commercially available. It's called Ketonix, and basically it's a USB device that you plug in, and you blow into it for 15 seconds, and then it gives you a color change so you can kind of see your level of ketosis. Now, there are a bunch more on the way. There's one out in Arizona right now being developed by a company called Envoy Technologies. I was actually a study participant with them because they wanted people that were already in ketosis and could show ketones on a meter. I can do that. So I blew into a bunch of bags for them, but I haven't seen the actual meter. I know they're trying to get FDA approval right now, so that's kind of what we're waiting on. Once they get the FDA approval, I'll be able to see the meter itself. I'm not sure if it'll have a digital readout. I'm not sure anything about it other than it's coming.
Nice.
So hopefully by this fall that will be out. And then I know Japanese researchers are currently working on an iPhone app that would enable you to blow into it and see your acetone levels. And I'm not sure when that will be developed, but I predict in Keto Clarity that by the year 2016, we'll be seeing some kind of a breath ketone meter available commercially in stores.
That's great. And if you were to just buy one right now, what would you recommend if someone were to just get one monitoring system?
Just one monitoring system?
Yeah.
Oh, if you want accuracy, you got to get the Precision Extra, the blood ketone meter. That's going to be the best way to be absolutely accurate. I love my Ketonix, and I didn't tell you the price. That Ketonix meter is only $100. It's a guy in Sweden that developed it. He has epilepsy. Speaking of epilepsy, he has epilepsy, and he's trying to control his seizures with a ketogenic diet. So he needed a way. He thought urine ketone strips were too messy and not accurate, and then the blood ketone was too painful pricking yourself. So if you freak out about pricking your finger, maybe the ketonics is a way to at least give you a yes/no answer whether you're in ketosis or not.
Got it. So quick review for all of our listeners. What Jimmy said there, first method is using the acetoacetate where we're testing it in the urine. The second is we're doing the beta-hydroxybutyrate in the blood, and then the acetone in the breath. So those are the three main methods there. Is there anything I missed, Jimmy?
Nope, that's it. Spot on.
Great. So talk about the difference between Atkins and the ketogenic diet that you're recommending here. How they're different.
Yeah, so I'm most famous for being a big success story on the Atkins diet back in 2004, lost 180 pounds on it. I love Dr. Atkins. I think what he did for nutrition is still underappreciated in the world today. I think he's going to get a posthumous Nobel Prize one of these days. At least he should.
Hope so.
Because he put on the map this idea of limiting carbohydrates and eating more fat. And so what's the difference between that he promoted and a ketogenic diet? Well, you can do an Atkins-style diet and not be ketogenic. And that's kind of surprising to a lot of people because sometimes, Justin, you'll hear people say, oh, the low-carb ketogenic diet. And then my question to those people that describe a diet that way is, so how are you measuring for ketones? And they're like, what do you mean? Low carb is ketogenic. I'm like, no, it's not. Low carb is one aspect of what it takes to get into ketosis, but it's not the only aspect, as we've been talking about moderating the protein and eating more fat. You really have to be skilled at kind of using the technologies we were just talking about to really know if you're in ketosis or not. So the problem with the Atkins diet is it's not necessarily ketogenic. And, Dr. Atkins would put the emphasis on carbohydrate restriction, but then he'd say, eat protein and fat to satiety. So he threw the protein in there, and I think that was a mistake for people that are trying to get into ketosis. Now, some people can reach ketosis and get those ketone levels in that blood meter or the breath meter that we were just talking about. They can get it eating an Atkins diet, but it's because their tolerance level for the protein and the threshold in the protein is probably higher. But if you've got that real sensitivity to carbs and protein like I do,
right?
Maybe Atkins isn't enough and you need to go full out ketogenic. I would say the best way to describe it is it's fattier, the ketogenic diet. You really have to up the fat, probably a lot more than what Dr. Atkins even promoted in his book. And I know he got raked over the coals for his high-fat diet, high-protein diet, but he really kind of started this whole look into the therapeutic use of ketosis in health. And that's kind of the heartbeat of what we tried to do in Keto Clarity.
Great points. Great points on there. Wow. So, Jimmy, my head's spinning right now with all the information. I learned a lot of new things already here.
Cool.
So what would you say your biggest 3 criticisms are regarding the ketogenic diet?
So, I know there's criticisms from all angles, and that's what's kind of funny about this is, I dibble dabble in the low carb and paleo communities, and one of the interesting ones from the paleo community is, a very low carb ketogenic diet is going to induce hypothyroidism, which has kind of always been funny to me. People like Chris Kresser and Paul Jaminet, and they're doing great work. I have great respect for what they're doing, but quite frankly, they're putting out bad information, and
right.
it's not fair to the ketogenic diet to have that label, that scarlet letter, so to speak, that it induces hypothyroidism. Because I get emails all the time. People are like, I'd try that ketosis thing you talk about. Unfortunately, it's going to give me hypothyroidism because Chris Kresser and Paul Jaminet say it will. I'm going, please. The problem that comes into play here is this, Justin. They are predicating that conclusion on some studies that, yes, they were low-carb ketogenic diets, but guess what else they were? They were hypocaloric. In other words, low-calorie diets. And, you're the thyroid expert. You know about this stuff. You've got to eat adequate calories or the thyroid starts doing stuff.
Absolutely.
And so that's a big one. I think that's a huge criticism that's unfounded. And anybody that's thinking about doing a ketogenic diet and you're worried about your thyroid, I say give it a go, but make sure you're eating plenty of calories. And guess how you can get more calories? Eat more fat.
Absolutely.
That's the easiest way to get more calories. And if you do that, you'll be able to be just fine with your thyroid. I've never had any issues, at least outwardly, no symptoms that I have any kind of thyroid issues, and I eat 30 grams of carbs a day.
Have you done any thyroid testing on yourself at all?
I have, and we actually address this point in the book as well. My levels of different things are a bit lower, but maybe the people who have the higher levels of thyroid, and this is your territory, so you correct me if I'm wrong. Higher levels of various thyroid things on their panel, perhaps those are the ones that are high, and the people that are on a ketogenic diet are the normal ones.
Interesting points there. And I know that the amount of carbs that you'll need to be in ketosis will vary depending on your activity level. I've heard Ben Greenfield talk about having up to 200 carbs a day, and he's doing Ironman type of activities and still being in ketosis. So can you talk about where too much exercise, ketosis may not be the best thing, but also some people may need more carbs and still be able to stay in ketosis while exercising more. Can you touch upon those issues?
Yeah, rock on Ben Greenfield. He was one of my experts in keto clarity, and he's exactly right. When you're able to use those strategically in competition and in exercise performance, and you're able to still burn fat for fuel, eating that many carbs, he's a well-oiled machine when it comes to this. So again, it goes back to the individual. You've got to figure out if that works for you and what your goal is. And if your goal is exercise performance, and if in your training you're able to be fat adapted and keto adapted, and then on, race day, up the carbs a bit, and you're able to do well and be fully fat adapted, go for it. And there's definitely nothing wrong with that. And it's going to be a tinkering around process. There's no, perfect formula for this is what everybody should do for, whatever the activity is. You just got to figure it out, and it's going to differ from person to person.
That's great. I want to wrap up here with one last question so people can get a sense of what a day in the life of Jimmy Moore is like. Can you walk us through what you would eat on a typical day, breakfast, lunch, dinner?
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is there's no such thing as a typical day because, we live in a society where we eat breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack, midnight snack. We're like grazing all day long. I haven't eaten that way in years. I don't even remember the last time that I had more than a couple of meals in one day. Typically, it's 1 to 2 meals a day. And we often hear breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I could not agree more, except I don't agree it has to be in the morning. Because look at the word breakfast. What does it mean? Break the fast, right?
Yes.
So if you're fasting overnight, which everybody is when they're sleeping, unless you're sleep eating somehow, you're going to wake up in the morning. And if you're not hungry, why do you eat? Why would you eat if you're not hungry in the morning? So break the fast when you get hungry. And that could be 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but it's only when you break that fast, and that could be midday. So I probably could eat somewhere around midday at like 1 or 2 o'clock. And, I can have eggs cooked in butter. I like to throw some sour cream on top of that with some cheese and whole avocado on the side, maybe some bacon or yes, it's very fatty. Bacon or sausage. And then sometimes I'll even get some more butter and take a little bite of butter with each bite of food. And then that meal will hold me upwards of 12, 16, sometimes as much as the 24 hours until the next day. So that's an example of something I would have in a typical day.
That's great. And what's your favorite ketogenic dessert? It won't throw you out.
The ketogenic dessert that won't throw me out of ketosis doesn't exist. Because for me, I'm so sensitive to carbohydrates that I have to be extremely careful. I guess if I had to choose a quote unquote dessert, it would be, dark chocolate and cream cheese.
That sounds great.
85% dark chocolate, and put some cream cheese on it. Give a little more fat. Dark chocolate actually is really, really high in fat. If you ever look at like true dark chocolate, and I'm not talking Hershey's Special, you people. That's not dark chocolate. There's a brand I like. It's called Taza brand. It's a really nice, they put little cacao nibs in the chocolate. It's so good. But it gives you that chocolatey flavor, really rich, deep chocolatey flavor. And then you add the extra cream cheese, so it gives a little bit of a creaminess, almost like a pie consistency. So that's, I guess, a ketogenic dessert. But try to stay away from sweet things, especially if you still have the carb cravings and you're not able to control your blood sugar that well yet. Let's get that under control first before you start worrying about low-carb ketogenic desserts.
That makes a lot of sense. Excellent. Well, his name is Jimmy Moore. He has a new book coming out next week, August 5th, called Keto Clarity. Jimmy, can you tell us more where my listeners can find out more information about you and all of your podcasts and blogs and such?
Sure, and thank you for having me on your show. Yeah, it's actually going to be in hardback, Kindle ebook, and the Audible audiobook. When I did Cholesterol Clarity last year, Justin, people were like, "Where's the audiobook?" And I'm like, what do you mean an audiobook? They're like, "You've got to have an audiobook." I'm like, okay. And then they're like, "You've got to read it." And I went, "What? I've never done that before." So being a podcaster that people know my voice, I've done well over 1,000 episodes of my podcasts combined. I guess people wanted to hear my voice. So we did do Keto Clarity and audiobook as well. So all three of those will be available. KetoClarity.com is the website if you want to learn more information about it. We'll have sample chapters and things like that on there. How do you find me? You can go to livinlavitalowcarb.com. And if that's too much to remember, you can just type in Jimmy Moore in a Google search. And I think I'm the whole first page. Everything on that first page is all my stuff.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jimmy.
Thank you, sir. And we actually address this point in the book as well. My levels of different things are a bit lower, but maybe the people who have the higher levels of thyroid, and this is your territory, so you correct me if I'm wrong. Higher levels of various thyroid things on their panel, perhaps those are the ones that are high, and the people that are on a ketogenic diet are the normal ones.
Interesting points there. And I know that the amount of carbs that you'll need to be in ketosis will vary depending on your activity level. I've heard Ben Greenfield talk about having up to 200 carbs a day, and he's doing Ironman type of activities and still being in ketosis. So can you talk about where too much exercise, maybe ketosis may not be the best thing, but also some people may need more carbs and still be able to stay in ketosis while exercising more. Can you touch upon those issues?
Yeah, rock on Ben Greenfield. He was one of my experts in Keto Clarity, and he's exactly right. When you're able to use those strategically in competition and in exercise performance, and you're able to still burn fat for fuel, eating that many carbs, he's a well-oiled machine when it comes to this. So again, it goes back to the individual. You've got to figure out if that works for you and what your goal is. And if your goal is exercise performance, and if in your training you're able to be fat adapted and keto adapted, and then on, race day, up the carbs a bit, and you're able to do well and be fully fat adapted, go for it. There's definitely nothing wrong with that. And it's going to be a tinkering around process. There's no, perfect formula for this is what everybody should do for, whatever the activity is. You just got to figure it out. And it's going to differ from person to person.
That's great. I want to wrap up here with one last question so people can get a sense of what a day in the life of Jimmy Moore is like. Can you walk us through what you would eat on a typical day, breakfast, lunch, dinner?
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is there's no such thing as a typical day because, we live in a society where we eat breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack, midnight snack. We're like grazing all day long. I haven't eaten that way in years. I don't even remember the last time that I had more than a couple of meals in one day. Typically, it's 1 to 2 meals a day. And we often hear breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I could not agree more, except I don't agree it has to be in the morning. Mm-hmm. Because look at the word breakfast. What does it mean? Break the fast, right?
Yes.
So if you're fasting overnight, which everybody is when they're sleeping, unless you're sleep eating somehow, you're going to wake up in the morning. And if you're not hungry, why do you eat? Why would you eat if you're not hungry in the morning? So break the fast when you get hungry. And that could be 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but it's only when you break that fast, and that could be midday. So I probably could eat somewhere around midday at like 1 or 2 o'clock. And, I can have eggs cooked in butter. I like to throw some sour cream on top of that with some cheese and whole avocado on the side, maybe some bacon or yes, it's very fatty. Bacon or sausage. And then sometimes I'll even get some more butter and take a little bite of butter with each bite of food. And then that meal will hold me upwards of 12, 16, sometimes as much as the 24 hours until the next day. So that's an example of something I would have in a typical day.
That's great. And what's your favorite ketogenic dessert? It won't throw you out.
The ketogenic dessert that won't throw me out of ketosis doesn't exist. Because for me, I'm so sensitive to carbohydrates that I have to be extremely careful. I guess if I had to choose a quote-unquote dessert, it would be, dark chocolate and cream cheese.
That sounds great.
85% dark chocolate, and put some cream cheese on it. Give a little more fat. Dark chocolate actually is really, really high in fat. If you ever look at like true dark chocolate, and I'm not talking Hershey's Special, you people. That's not dark chocolate. I get there's a brand I like. It's called Taza brand. Mm-hmm. It's a really nice. They put little cacao nibs in the chocolate. It's so good, but it gives you that chocolatey flavor, really rich, deep chocolatey flavor. And then you add the extra cream cheese, so it gives a little bit of a creaminess, almost like a pie consistency. So that's, I guess, a ketogenic dessert. But try to stay away from sweet things, especially if you still have the carb cravings and you're not able to control your blood sugar that well yet. Let's get that under control first before you start worrying about low-carb ketogenic desserts.
That makes a lot of sense. Excellent. Well, his name is Jimmy Moore. He has a new book coming out next week, August 5th, called Keto Clarity. Jimmy, can you tell us more where my listeners can find out more information about you and all of your podcasts and blogs and such?
Sure, and thank you for having me on your show. Yeah, it's actually going to be in hardback, Kindle ebook, and the Audible audiobook. When I did Cholesterol Clarity last year, Justin, people were like, "Where's the audiobook?" And I'm like, what do you mean an audiobook? They're like, "You've got to have an audiobook." I'm like, okay. And then they're like, "You've got to read it." And I went, what? I've never done that before. So being a podcaster that people know my voice, I've done well over 1,000 episodes of my podcasts combined. I guess people wanted to hear my voice. So we did do Keto Clarity and audiobook as well. So all three of those will be available. KetoClarity.com is the website if you want to learn more information about it. We'll have sample chapters and things like that on there. How do you find me? You can go to livinlavidalowcarb.com, and if that's too much to remember, you can just type in Jimmy Moore in a Google search, and I think I'm the whole first page. Everything on that first page is all my stuff.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jimmy.
Thank you, sir.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to beyondwellnessradio.com/question. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.